The fallen Space Marines who pledged themselves to the God of Decay, the Death Guard on Nurgle's claimed Astartes. Once one of the Emperor's original founding legions, they fell to the sway of chaos, joining Horus's coup and allowing the Chaos Gods to change them forever. Now, they act as the harbingers of disease, marching against the Imperium and its corpse Emperor. Like all heretic Astartes, the Death Guard were once loyal to the throne, having been made by the Emperor of Mankind. The 14th Legion were first known as the Dusk Raiders, gaining their name from their tactics of beginning conflicts during the Great Crusade just as the night fell. They would strike at the shift of the light, striding across even open ground, advancing within the shadow of night. They were unwavering in their duty, renowned for holding their position when ordered, even against heavy fire, maintaining their stand until the last body if required. When they attacked, they systematically destroyed their target, with wave after wave of armoured marines striking in until the task was complete. This isn't to say that they threw their lives away, they just simply did not fear death and trusted in their resilience to see the day through. When they eventually found their lost Primarch, they found him twisted and poisoned, a seed of hatred against the Emperor already planted in his heart. The Emperor had brought Mortarian into the fold of the Imperium somewhat unwillingly, whilst proving himself stronger than the Primarch by easily defeating the man Mortarian had failed to kill. Their Primarch remade the Dusk Raiders in the image of his own warband, those who he had trained and fought with on his now homeworld of Barbaros, the Death Guard. He stood before his legion, a grim figure, in robes and bearing a large black scythe. As this Reaper called out to his new Terran-born soldiers, he proclaimed,
"You are my unbroken blades. You are the Death Guard. By your hand shall justice be delivered, and doom shall stalk 1,000 worlds."
With an origin story like that, you can understand how the Death Guard came to be feared amongst the enemies of mankind. As the Crusade continued, Mortarian pushed his warriors to be tougher, forcing a regime of exposure to toxins and poisons, conditioning these once Dusk Raiders the same way that his Death Guard had been. He was determined to make his legion tough enough to fight the long and difficult war to free mankind from oppression and terror. It was this determination that led him down the path of treachery, however, as when Horus told him of the Emperor's plans to enslave mankind and make himself a god, the Primarch of the Death Guard trusted in his brother. It helped, of course, that Mortarian's right-hand man and first captain was already a big fan of the Ruinous Powers, and so with his Primarch now falling too, Typhon made quick work of turning the Marines of the other Legion over to the dark side. Cue their meeting with Grandfather Nurgle. It was Typhon who brought the Death Guard into the clutches of the Dark God, tricking his Primarch into bringing the fleets of the Legion into the warp without any navigators, promising his Primarch that he would be able to guide the fleets himself through to safety. He instead led the ships right to Nurgle. There, the Dark God blessed his new children with disease and infection, the Destroyer Plague and Nurgle's Rot taking hold across the Legion. Bloated flies and other insects stung and bit at the Marines, and their flesh boiled and swole. Here, their training proved to be their downfall, the resilience of the Death Guard allowing them to survive these gifts, surviving the twisted change into the disgusting Chaos Space Marines we know and love today. It was this change that cemented their new life as Heretic Astartes, forever locking the Legion into servitude to the Ruinous Powers. Typhon himself was reborn by this process, becoming one with his armour as his body swelled. Typhus, the host of the Destroyer Hive, was born, his body becoming a grand colony of these disease-carrying insects. Mortarian, who hated to see his legion's resilience fail to save them, made a pact with Nurgle. He offered up his soul and those of his many sons in exchange for freedom from this endless pain and from the warp. The Lord of Decay had been waiting for this and snapped up the offer. The Primarch, now his personal pet, he released the Death Guard back into real space. The Plague Marines of the Death Guard emerging as bloated, filthy Astartes. Their Primarch changed most of all. He was now greater in size, a demon of death and decay that now truly took the form of a Grim Reaper. Whilst Horus's heresy did fail, and the Death Guard were eventually pushed back into the warp, they still remained resilient. Rather than being broken and splintered, the Death Guard retreated orderly into the safety of the Immaterium. There, they set up on a demonic world, similar to Barbarous in its toxicity, and it would be from here that they would organise their war against the Imperium for the next 10,000 years, ever remaining a poisoned thorn in humanity's side. The Death Guard have really started to ramp things up of late, since the return of Rabote Gulliver. As the Ultramarines Primarch came back to try and steer the Imperium back on track, he had to contend with Mortarian and the Thousand Sons Primarch Magnus just bursting into real space. Mortarian and his legion led a war against the worlds of Ultramar, starting a conflict that would become known as the Plague Wars. Here the Imperium would face off against these ancient warriors, falling hard against waves of new disease and plague, voted demon engines, and the demonic allies of Nurgle. The biggest thing for me in these conflicts was the effect these diseases had on the mortals of the war. Sure, there was plenty of marine on marine action, but the fighting forces of the Astra Militarum also faced the brunt of the Death Guard's advance. There's a great bit right at the start of a book called Dark Imperium, where 7 Imperial Guard soldiers are recovering from injuries suffered from the Death Guard. In the night, their warp-blessed infections take a hold of them, and they venture out into the gardens of the hospital. There they complete their transformation, their illnesses twisting their form and their bones into that of a plague bearer. These 7 demons then perform a ritual, opening a portal for which the forces of the Death Guard could enter from, allowing the war to expand to a new world without any warning. Not only is this an awesome image of the horrifying nature of chaos, it also provides another reason to fear the Death Guard. Even if you survive your fight with them, there's still every chance that you've caught one of the many diseases that they carry, and you could literally explode into a demon of filth at any time. Speaking of infecting humans, one of the new weapons that the Death Guard brought with them was the Poxwalker Hordes. These unfortunates who have tasted the venom of Typhus's living hives have not remained dead for very long. They become reanimated, walking plague zombies that survive to suffer and spread their sickness. The warp energy that sustains them passes from one victim to the next, ever expanding the hordes of living dead that shamble amongst the ever-advancing forces of the Death Guard. One of the more unique aspects of the forces of the Death Guard, I'd like to introduce you to the Tallymen. These little guys do as you'd expect. They keep tallies. They count woes, shells expended, wounds inflicted, fleeing foes, victories achieved, losses suffered, and every other battlefield factoid you could think of. Unlike you or I might, they keep these tallies in groups of 7, Nurgle's blessed number. As they reach every complete tally, warp energy emits from these endless counters, empowering both the Death Guard and the illnesses they transmit. I find these Marines fascinating, and an interesting bit of fluff to add to the army. They are the priests of the battlefield, and are obsessed with the 7-fold doctrine. Outside of battles, it's these warriors that safeguard the most virulent of the Death Guard's bioweapons, Grand Imperial warheads and other weapons empowered by Nurgle's gifts. On the surface, the Death Guard can come across as just smelly versions of Marines, but there's a lot going on if you delve deeper. Their Primarch is a pet to their god, their legion more realistically led by their first captain Typhus. Their command structures still hold relatively true to the days of the Crusade, but over the 1,000 years they have adapted and changed to better fit their new Nurgle situation. If you can get past all the gross parts of the army, there's actually a lot of interesting bits of flavour and lore to be found. I'm sure we'll be visiting these disgustingly resilient lads in the future on the channel, but for now we'll leave them here to fester. If there's any cool bits of Death Guard lore that you know, let me know in the comments below. As always, if you've enjoyed the video, consider dropping a like and subscribing to the channel. It really helps us to continue what we're doing. Thanks, and I'll see you next time.